Hi, and welcome to The Dish on Divorce. I'm Jennifer Barkin.
And I'm Leanne Townsend.
And tonight we have a very special guest, Mark Harendorf. And Mark is a CDFA, and the CDFA is a Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. So Mark, explain to our listeners, please, what do you do? What's a CDFA?
What don't I do sometimes is what I get asked. Actually, I'm going to start with that and tell you what I don't do, because a lot of people think that we do forensic work, and we don't do forensic work. And I sort of give an example to try to clarify. If on the financial statement that one puts down there, if someone says that they have a bank account with $100 in it, we take the position that that's done in good faith, and that there is a bank account with $100 in it. What we don't know is if there was 4 other bank accounts with $400 that are also missing, or if that one bank account with 100 should be 100,000. That's where the forensic work comes into play. So we don't do that. We take it on the good faith that it's just there. But really, what AFD, and it's the business that I run, Accounting for Divorce. What we do is we help the lawyers. More so, well, we're helping the clients too, of course, but we're helping the lawyers because they know law, and they obviously, some of them don't know tax or don't know accounting. And the client knows nothing usually, unfortunately. They're relying on their professionals. So quite often what I'm doing is working with the lawyer to review the separation agreements prior to go to mediation or prior to going to the other side. And the lawyer is using me to say, now, is this agreement good from a tax perspective? Poke holes in it. What's wrong with it? Could we have suggested to do something different? Could we have divided this asset versus that asset? Spouse A is going to walk away with the home. Spouse B is going to walk away with the investments. Well, that's great. Spouse B has all the investments. They can cash them and do things. Spouse A has a beautiful home, but you can't take a brick out of the home to put food on the table. So we look at the agreements and say, are both parties coming out well? And is there a different way to divide up the assets? Basically all on the equalization side. Don't get into child custody issues and all of that kind of stuff. It's certainly not what I do. That's what you guys are for. But generally what we're looking at is to say, is this agreement making sense? And I've seen many that don't, many of them that just don't make sense. Or, it might sound good today, but in 6 months from now, you're going to have a big problem. So that's a lot of what we're doing, is just looking at the agreements and seeing if there's a better way to do things.
Now, is it mostly from, you mentioned like a tax planning aspect, is that the primary thing that you're looking at, or are you looking for, so say I was to engage you for a client, would that be the main reason why I would get you involved, or would there be other reasons?
Are you the client or are you the lawyer?
I'm the lawyer.
Okay, so the lawyer's engaging me primarily for that.
Yeah.
Okay, however, AFD, Accounting for Divorce, we get clients from the client themselves or the lawyer, and at every spectrum within that divorce as well. So I've had many clients call and say, I'm all ready to go. I'm going to be asking my spouse for a divorce this weekend. And I go, okay, hold on. Have you done A, B, C, and D? And most often not, no, they haven't. And I said, well, my advice to you is don't ask for the divorce this weekend because you're not ready yet. So I do a lot of work in the pre-ask phase, but that's when the client's coming to me, not the lawyer, right? I'm getting them at the beginning. They don't even know where their tax returns are. They don't know whether they're leasing their car or they own their car. They know nothing. And as you know, there's a lot of work to be done once you open that conversation. There's no turning back.
No, definitely.
And you got to be prepared for it. And it's some of the littlest things. For example, I'll ask a client, the funds that you and your spouse pay your common bills with, is it from a joint bank account? Yeah, it's a joint bank account. I said, well, you realize by law, they can clean out that bank account on you first thing in the morning when you ask for divorce. Now, over time, you'll get what's in there. You'll get your half back, But in the meantime, you can't put gas in your car. So get ready. Do you have your own bank account? Do you have your own credit card? There's a lot of preliminary work to get ready. But that's on the client side. The clients that come to us from the lawyers themselves are saying, I have a client who's right at the very initial stages. I don't have time to do the financial statements. I don't have time to do all of that work. You go do it. And I will. I'll work with the clients right from the very, very beginning. I'd like to instruct the client as much as I can to do the work on their own. I feel engaging them and empowering them to know what's going on in their own life is way more important than me just running with it and doing it myself. So I teach them how to do it, and then I check in on them, and I sort of coach them to do it. But of course, I'm there behind the scenes, working with them. Or I can get a lawyer saying, I'm about to go to mediation next month. Here's our draft proposal. Does it make sense? Would you think of doing it in a different way? AOs B $100,000, and we're just going to take it from the matrimonial home versus selling off investments or whatever, and what tax issues are involved. So it just depends where the client comes to me from and at what stage in that divorce they're at. That will dictate the work that they need to have done.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I have that designation,
Yes.
Coming Clean. And one thing that I found very interesting in the CDFA training was in the family law, Leanne can attest to this, there's this 50-50 equalization, or the splitting, sharing of assets, 50-50. But in CDFA training, we learn when is 50-50 not fair. So what does that mean, Mark?
So it's a good question. And one of the things I like to do is I want people to walk away with an equitable split, not necessarily an equal split, which goes to your point. So I alluded to before, if a couple has, a very simple example, a matrimonial home, which is dealt with separately in law anyway, but unless they have a contract at the beginning, and assuming there's no prenuptial contract of any kind, that asset's going to be split. But when I say split, the net proceeds are ultimately owing to each spouse 50-50. But it doesn't mean it has to go that way. Mm-hmm. So if there's another asset that needs to be split, they can use the proceeds from the matrimonial home, assuming it's going to be sold, and do it that way because presumably when they're selling their matrimonial home, it's their principal residence, and the gain on that would be tax-free. Whereas if they need to split an investment account, there might be accrued gains in that investment account, and they got to sell it and incur tax in order to split up the money. So they're ultimately going to come away with the net family property calculation done appropriately, but where I come into play is to say, how are you making that equalization payment? And is there a better way to do it than that's being proposed at a certain time?
And I think too, it's a misnomer or misunderstanding that a lot of people in the public have when they do think it is this 50-50 thing, because it's not. And, I'll get people that call me up, for a consultation, and they're like, I understand it's 50-50. And I'm like, well, no. Wait a minute. It's an equalization payment. It doesn't mean that equalization payment is 50-50. It's going to depend on how the numbers come out when we do the financial statement. You may have exclusions, you may have deductions. There may be, things you brought into the marriage. So it isn't like as clean cut as it like this 50-50 idea.
Absolutely. And the more complex their lives are, the more complex the numbers become, right? And there's a reason why, and you're the lawyer, not me, but you know this, there's a reason why that you deal with the equalization first before you deal with support and child support and so forth, because when you get to the support side of it, you can combine that with the equalization, and therefore you're not coming out 50-50 anymore.
Yeah.
So there's reasons to do things in certain orders. And that comes back to the importance of the financial statement. And we're not going to get technical tonight and go through numbers and things, but it's so critical because not only does it drive equalization, it drives support, and then it drives, which I spend a lot of time doing with clients and the lawyers ask for, is here's the offer, so I can review it from a tax perspective as well. And then I'm often asked, not only from the lawyers but the clients, what's my life going to look like post-divorce? Mm-hmm. Can I afford this offer? And quite often I have to be the reality check for some people. And I'd say, more than 90% of my clients are the women. just the way it falls out. And a lot of them are being presented with an offer from their business/husband who knows more about numbers than they do. And they don't know. They just simply don't know if it's a good offer.
Yeah.
And now I don't negotiate the offer. I'm not, playing law whatsoever, but I'm saying if this is the offer that you're going to be getting, you're getting the house, you're getting this, you're getting that, you're not going on those 6 vacations this year. Okay, well, no one's going on vacation this year anyway, but once COVID is over, your life is not going to be the same as it was before. Mm-hmm. And you have an obligation to self-sustain yourself. And a lot of them don't realize that. And the judges, as you know, are going to look at it and say, your spouse is going to give you a certain amount of support, but you're more than capable. You're young. You can get into the workforce and do something. So it's a big reality check. And that's why I want to see the financial statement, because it details all of the budgeting items of what they spend their money on in their life, right down to dog food and groceries and so forth. And I poke holes in it a lot.
Well, a lot of people don't realize, I find with clients, how important it is to be accurate. Because they don't want to do it in the first place, as we were discussing before we went on camera. And I find a lot of them, they want to rush through it. And the reality is, you, me, when we're looking through their financial statements, we only know what they tell us, they have. We don't know the secret things or whatever. And so I've had situations where clients, misrepresented numbers on it, not intentionally. They were just kind of being quick or thinking it didn't really matter. And then they got caught down the road by their spouse that, hey, that number is way, way off. And then it hurts their credibility on everything else. And they really weren't intending to be misleading. They were just kind of naive and just stupid, really.
Yeah, and it's one of the first things I tell the clients that I deal with them. I said, and I don't want to be negative. I really am a glass half full kind of person. But I say to them, look, you're being presented with a financial statement from the other side. You're going to do your own, whether I help you or not, whatever you. Now you're going to get one from the other side, and you and only you are going to know best whether that agreement is completely full of what, or it's within the range of what you think it's going to be. Everyone wants to hide assets. It's immoral. You're not supposed to do it. We all know that. It's against the law. But no one, if you're a payor, you don't want to pay. That's the bottom line. So and this really where it comes into play, a lot of that are in the private businesses. That's a whole spectrum of a law, huge detailed work.
Yeah.
And someone has to, on their financial statement, value their business. And whether they hire an independent valuation firm or not, which can go a long way and take a long time, they'll put that their company is worth $1 million. And I'll say to usually the woman that I'm dealing with, I'll say, well, what do you think his business is worth? $1 million? She will, yeah, you're in the ballpark, or $1 million. He brought in $1 million just last year alone. It's worth $50 million. So you alone are going to know how much of a fight you want to have. And it comes down to numbers. It's the bottom line.
That's
it's about
when that
numbers.
argument always comes from the business owner. But I am the business. If I got hit by a bus, business is worth nothing.
Correct. It's the goodwill factor.
Right.
And a doctor, there's no goodwill in a doctor's practice because the doctor's the doctor. He leaves, there's no business. But Google's worth something. It doesn't matter who Mr. Google is. I'm joking, right?
Yeah.
So it depends on the business that you're dealing with. And it comes back to numbers. And, I often tongue-in-cheek and joke with my clients a little and say, you know what? Save your money and put your kids through college, not mine.
I say that too.
And if
you put mine through, but not your own.
Right. And, if you think that business is worth $1.5 million and not $1 million, well, that extra $500,000, only $250,000 is yours. So do you want to spend 60 or 70 in legals and spend 2 years of your life ripping him apart in valuations? You have to value which fights you want to make and which ones you don't, right? And that's not for me to decide, that's for the client to decide. But it's my job to educate them to say, I think you've probably heard this before, every good negotiation means both parties come away unhappy.
Yes.
Yes.
Judges say that too.
Right?
We know this was a good result.
So if you're both miserable, then your professionals did a good job, right?
Yeah.
And you have to value where you're going to pick and choose. And which leads to a good point that if you're too early in the process and you're too emotional and you're hurting, you're not ready.
Yeah.
you're not ready, or you're going to waste a lot of time and money, either way.
Yeah, for sure.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Now, one of the things we were chatting about too before we started the show was, the idea of manipulating numbers. And, I had someone I was on the phone with today, actually, a new client, and she, she's in the unfortunate situation as a woman where she owes spousal support and she's going to owe an equalization. Her husband's one of these people, he works 6 months of the year and then collects unemployment the other 6 months. And that's historically been the relationship. So it's not like he's just doing it now. She's in a situation where she accepted that.
Right.
And so, one of the things she was saying to me is, I just don't want to owe him anything. Like, what can you do with the numbers to make it so that I don't owe him anything? And so, I'm
Hire another lawyer. 'Cause I'm not
yeah,
interested
exactly.
in being disbarred. Right.
Exactly.
You can't do that. So one thing I find, I'm going to go back to the 50-50.
Right.
And one thing that I like to tell people is what's 50-50 today, look in the future. Was this really a fair split?
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that?
Well, and it comes back to what I was saying before, and that is, if you have a pile of assets, inherently, let's say you're going to both walk away more or less with 50-50. However, if I'm walking away with a house in Forest Hill, a house is going to go up in value a whole lot faster than a GIC that I'm making 0.5% on. So even though we both want to get the same number, what's that number going to look like down the road? And can I get income from that number? And that's where the argument of this 50-50 comes back, and the concept of double dipping is an example. Where someone has a large pension, for example, and they give away half the pension, and then they're paying support on the pension as well.
Yeah.
So there's so many different things that come into play that the lawyers who know the law sometimes just don't have time to deal with.
See, I would say that's part of their job. Like,
It should
to
be.
me, that is a bad lawyer, to be honest. Like, a lot of the things you're talking about, I consider that to be part of my job. And if I'm not doing that for the client, I'm not being a good lawyer. But having said that, I guess at least if they recognize they're not doing it and they bring you in, then I guess they're not maybe being a bad lawyer because they're
Right, and-
they're recognizing it and
And that's what I'm
introducing you into
doing
the
a fair
equation.
bit now with. I'm developing, I have a few now, and I'm developing more relationships with lawyers where they're sort of putting me on just a flat retainer
Yeah.
to say, you know what, you're not going to get too involved, but I just need to throw my agreements by you as a disbursement to the client because I want to provide that service to the client.
Right.
And whether I have the knowledge, it's complicated, not complicated, whatever it might be. So it's critical. It really is critical because, I could go on. It's a short show. We have so many examples, but I had one just last month where couples separate. Husband stayed in the matrimonial home. She moved out. She was renting something. She was about 10 years older than him, and she didn't want him to have to move out of the matrimonial home. So they made an agreement, and it was in their written agreement, that he can stay in the matrimonial home till he retires. And then they'll sell it and split the proceeds. And that was projected to be about 10 to 15 years out.
Wow.
And she was asking me, what happens with the principal residence? Will it still be tax-free to me in 15 years from now? And I said, it can be, but you're losing control over the home. You're losing 15 years of not having your money up front and you can't go buy anything, which is a separate issue. But if he were to rent part of the home during those 15 years while you're waiting to have it sold, you just lost the principal residence and you got screwed. So why would you want to do that? Have him buy you out now, buy him out now, let him stay there, that's fine. So I see all these kinds of crazy things where people think they've got a great idea, and when then unfortunately the professionals get a hold of it, we poke a lot of holes in it and show them that you might want to do that and it's great now, but in 5-10 years from now, it's not such a good idea anymore.
I'm seeing a lot of manipulation to remain commingled.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also saying, maybe let's think this out and let's play this out, what this is going to look like.
Yeah, there's a lot of people don't understand what the commingling is. Most of the clients that I'm dealing with are in this gray divorce, silver divorce, somewhere between 45 and 60. And
45 is gray.
some of us are, some of us are not. But, they got married in their 20s And nobody went to the altar planning their divorce, unless they had a very, very rich parent who demanded a prenup, at the beginning, with family laws and trusts and things like that. But putting those cases aside, they didn't understand what commingling was. So parent passes away, they get an inheritance, and they just pay off their mortgage. Well, you just gave the other half the value.
Yeah.
And they don't get into that. And so I'm also starting to develop relationships with some of the synagogues and churches, although COVID has sort of stopped that in the last year and a half or so. But putting on because they have marriage workshops where the clergy are bringing in the young couples and teaching them about how to be married. And I'm trying to teach them how not to ever see me again professionally.
I think that's great, because I've often thought, you need to get usually independent legal advice to get a divorce. I feel like you should need some form of advice, legal advice, whether it's from a lawyer or informational advice from a non-lawyer who knows the information, like before you get married, so that you understand how it'll play out.
Because you don't want to go, to a young couple who are, in their mid-20s or late 20s, who are madly in love, who are probably a little naive too, who don't really know what's going on, might not be worth a whole lot or nothing. And say, well, we're not going to have those problems. We're going to be married forever. And I go, let me ask a question on both of you, because the math is that on that young couple, one of their parents is divorced, just based on the odds.
But they don't want to hear it.
Of course they don't, right?
That same conversation
so
about the
it's a completely different, right?
Yeah.
No. I don't even go that route. But it is a good service, because they need to know certain things. But that's a whole different animal of certain things. Yeah.
One of the things I find that's common, and I'm wondering if this is something that comes your way, is when people are splitting up, a lot of the times the woman is the one who wants to hold on to that matrimonial home for dear life. And, sometimes she's in a situation where, after things are divided, she's just really not going to have the income to be able to keep it. But she really, she's steadfast, she wants to hold on to that home. And so I'm wondering if you deal with that, and, what your comments are on that whole situation.
I get it all the time. And, my job is to help them pull away the emotional tie from the business tie. And it's difficult. I raised my kids here, and, I see little etchings on the wall of how old they were when we measured their height and things, and I don't want to leave here. Or I also get, my kids are, they're in university, they come home, that haven't quite moved out yet. I don't want to move out till they at least move out. So I get it all the time. And one of the things I do at the very beginning with any client is, when I get all the information and go through everything, one of the things I ask them is, what are your top 3 wants? What are your top 3, things that you really want to come away with this, in this divorce? And what are the couple of the things that are your absolute musts, like non-negotiables? And sometimes I'll hear non-negotiable, I'm not leaving this home, period. And we have to make it work. But I also find time doesn't always heal all wounds, but when the separation's over and they're done and they're alone, they realize it's time to move on. But you can't force that hand until it happens.
Yeah.
But it happens all the time. So my job is to help say, okay, well, how are you going to afford this home?
Yeah.
So you have to be the bad guy sometimes.
I do. Well, you know what? Not the bad guy, the realist.
Yeah, the reality check they need.
Reality check, right? And then it goes back to this financial statement. It keeps coming back in a circle, because your financial statement says this is what it's going to cost to run the home. These are your vacations this year. This is, kids going in school, whether he's paying Section 7s, this or that, whatever. But you need X amount of dollars to live in this home and the life that you want. Now, where's that going to come from? You work, fine. Support, fine. Where's it coming from? And if you inherited the home through the divorce, and it's, whatever, let's just say it's worth $2 million, which isn't very much in Toronto today if you're in Toronto, but let's just say it's a home worth $2 million, and let's also assume it's free and clear, there's no mortgage on it, and your kids have moved out. I can't break that emotional tie from the home for them, but I can show them that they can buy either a beautiful condo or a townhouse for $1 million or $1.2 million. They can put $700,000 in the bank and have it earn. And so,
well, they're not going to earn any money if it's in the bank.
Fair enough. Whatever they're
not
going
the
to
best
put.
place.
No, but
Yeah.
I am the reality check quite often, and that's why I want to see those financial statements and their agreement and poke holes in it.
So that's really interesting information and very helpful information that you've given to our viewers. If they want to find you, where can they find you?
So call me, AFD, Accounting for Divorce. I also practice accounting as a full-time job as well.
Wow.
But yeah, I have a website, Accounting for Divorce. I can give you the information. You guys can post it up. That's fine. And really, my philosophy is I just want to help people. I really didn't get into the very beginning with you, but I've been. That's what I do. I've been doing accounting for over 30 some odd years. And when I went through my own divorce, I realized I know what I'm doing in my own divorce because I have some of the experience, but there's so many people. And my ex-wife was in the, the financial world as well. So, we're both fairly educated with what we had to deal with. So it went relatively quickly. But there's so many people who just don't know. And, you and I were just talking before we came in here today about a client who is just, I think, blindly being led by their ex and doesn't see it. And I hate when people get taken advantage of. It's I want to help people. I really want to help people. And there's lots that can be done. There's a lot of creative things that can be done.
Well, I think you're helping people even by coming on our show, and
I hope so.
People who are going to be listening to this. I think that's the advice you've given and the information you've shared is amazing. So you're helping people right now.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
I'm
Thanks for
Jennifer
having
Barkin.
me.
And I'm Leanne Townsend.
And I'm Mark Harendorf. Thank you.
And thanks for joining us on The Dish on Divorce. We'll see you next time.